are joined by Naik, who's the Chief Executive Officer at TransUnion Africa. Thank you so much for your time, Lee. We do appreciate it. I want to start off by asking why we're here. You know, we have conference after conference. You wonder, does it really have an impact, especially on such an important topic about the unbanked, financial exclusion, given the African and South African context?
I think it's a great question. We find ourselves in a really interesting time as a country, and there's just so much going on. Specifically the G20 happening this year, it's worth just stepping back and saying why we're here. I just spoke at a conference, and I spoke around the challenges we face as South Africa. We're talking about a GDP of only 1.6%. We're talking about unemployment of north of 33%. Almost 2/3 of our youth are unemployed. So it's a challenging environment. So what has this got to do with payments? That's a big question to answer. Well, it's interesting, right? In Africa, we're actually more digitally ahead than most countries. You and I are used to not walking into a physical store, buying things on our phone, exchanging money for payments using mobile telephony. In fact, globally, there's a $1 trillion mobile wallet market, of which 70% is in Africa. So the question for us to think about is, in this global market that we know Africa is going to be all digital on, right? How do we start to proactively drive the collaboration that creates impact? So when you think about payments, you think about a highly excluded population. So what is that in South Africa? Of the 43 million adults in South Africa, there's 16 million adults that don't have access to the financial system. They have hopes and dreams like you and I, but actually they don't have access to the system. What we're hoping with this conference today is that we can start to talk about how we come together, common data standards, how we use telephony and other data sets to get to know people better. Because the point is quite simple. We all have hopes and dreams to have a better life for all South Africans, but it's the data that could help us overcome some of these challenges. So today's conversation is about coming together, how money moves, how we understand people, how do we understand them in their context. Not every South African is the same. We live in different areas, we have different personas, we have different challenges. Start to know the person and then start to get that person to trust the system. When we start to trust each other, we believe that we'll have an impact on the economy.
And what about collaboration? Because we obviously can't do this in isolation. I mean, the Reserve Bank has come in quite heavily in terms of how to manage the constant changes and innovation that's currently happening. But collaboration is key, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I think collaboration is certainly key. And the question is, how does one collaborate?
Yeah.
Not to be technical, but one of the key standards we spoke about today is something called ISO 20022, which is a very important data standard that allows us to come together. So if we all have the same language of comparing data, we start to understand people more cohesively, both small businesses and consumers. So that's part one. If we all have a common language, it allows us to communicate and start to understand people, their potential, and the challenges they face. The second thing about having a standard is that in this conference today, there's a large component of non-bank lenders, fintechs and other players like telcos. And the question is, how do we come together as one entity? As an end consumer for you and I, do we care that we're borrowing money from a bank? It could be a telco. Who knows us best? Who are we most loyal to? So today's conversation, and you're right, the SARB has put together the enabling platform and the regulations. The question for us largely is to overcome this focus we have on doing things by ourselves. When you have over 1,000 people at a conference like this, the question should really be, can we work together to see the customer in their moment of need? It could be a fintech in the community. It could be a large bank that works with a fintech. But we're going to think about the end customer and how they participate in the economy. Remember, the bigger game is for us to have a better life for all South Africans. And when you spoke about exclusion, it's worth noting that across the entire continent, there are 500 million people excluded from the financial system. If they start to participate, if they can get employment, we can start to make this truly a better life for all people. Final point worth noting is that for many of us as corporate organizations, we must also remember that we aren't the biggest hirers of people in the country. The biggest hirers of people are actually MSMEs or small micro and medium businesses, and they typically hire between 1 in 5 people. If we can get them enabled to participate, to do e-commerce, to trade, to settle, to reduce fraud, if we can enable them to be successful, we have more people participating, more people having more profitable lives, more better businesses, and more success generally.
Very interesting. I want to move over to the point around striking a balance between monetizing payments and intelligence and maintaining customer trust. Because with everything changing, I mean, AI is wild. Some of the things that are coming out from AI are good and also a little bit concerning, but there needs to be a balance between the two, doesn't there?
Absolutely. I think AI does come with its benefits.
Yeah.
One of the big things about the space we're talking about today is explainability. Customers need to trust us, consumers need to trust us. We've got some really good regulations, including that from PIPC, the protection of personal information. And when we think about PIPC, we need to realize that the data subject, the person that has the data, is the owner of the data. We need to respect the consent of the person and to show them value for what we intend doing. If we can show value, then we're able to get these individuals that want to participate. If we can't show value, then why will they participate? So there's a burden of proof on us to show that we can be trusted as an industry by the people of South Africa and the broader continent. The burden is on us for us to figure out how we actually bring together people and say, here's the value of what you've got. Now, what is value? Value could be getting your first payment from a rural community for a service you need hundreds of kilometers away. It could be getting your first personal loan, your first car. There's a variety of formats of how people get value. The one thing we can't afford to do is do things in absence or avoidance of the actual customer. Ask them what they want. Ask them for their trust and earn their trust. Don't just do it because we think it's the right thing to do. So it is a true collaboration between us as entities within the supply side. And on the demand side of the economy, we want to get consumers to trust that this is possible. And we must remember that we're only 31 years into a democracy. Our trust is still being earned between each other and between corporate and public sector.
So we own the data.
We own the data as long as it pertains to us. We are the data subjects. There are the data sets that we don't own and don't own or earn. And when those come together in new ways, we can find value. But there's two things worth mentioning. One, if there's data that you own as an end consumer, we need to get your permission to use data that's personal and owned by you. Secondly, you've also explained the concept of artificial intelligence. People want to be understood why we're doing certain things. We call it explainability of AI. If we can't explain something, then actually you won't get trust in people. Whether we say, yes, you're approved, or no, you're not approved, we want to know why. And one of the things we do at TransUnion, and what the industry has to do more generally, is find a way to earn the trust of people and show them, this is why I said no. This is how you go from a no to a maybe to a yes. We all want to know how to get there. And it's important to note that everybody is challenged in South Africa. As much as we're optimistic about our country, we need to realize that a large part of those that do have access to credit today actually are indebted to lenders, and only about 8 million of these people are current on their debt obligations, meaning many of us are struggling as everyday consumers. So for us to take on more and to do more, we want to trust that you've got our best interests at heart as a business, as a lender. And for us as a consumer, we should be more naive with our trust and say, can I really trust you? Earn my trust. And I think that's fair game in the world we live in, where people now have options. It isn't just one telco or one bank or one fintech. When we have choice, we need to figure out as businesses how we best position ourselves with the end customer.
And then just perhaps in closing, Lee, in terms of the concerns around data and privacy protection, that's obviously a very big one. I mean, I don't want people having my data, and for various reasons, and maybe it's a lack of understanding, but that risk and concern is increasing.
Absolutely. There's always going to be a risk about data, and every country in Africa tends to have different data regulations that protect privacy and data sovereignty, where the data goes, is it on the cloud, how is it being used. I think there's a balance here. there's the obligation and an imperative for us as the industry and as government to educate people on the power of data, on their rights as individuals, on how laws work, what they can do and can't do when something goes right or something goes wrong. It's important that we know that. We also need to explain to people the benefit they get by participating as part of a system of data sharing as well. But you're right, in the end, if we decide as individuals we don't want to participate because we have the choice, then under the laws we have, we do in fact have the choice to say, no, I don't want to participate. But in the world that we live in right now, to grow our economy, to create a social dividend for our people, we want to find a way to get them to trust a system. And as I said earlier, trust is new to our country. It's only 31 years. We must do more as government and the private sector to earn the trust of our people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, Lee. We appreciate
Pleasure.
it. Great.